Hello, I'm Dr. Neil Levitsky, and I'm a psychiatrist in Toronto, Canada. This video is meant to be a bit of instruction on the topic of how to meditate. There are many recordings. You'll see some on my YouTube channel. You'll find many recordings on the internet, on YouTube, on different apps that are essentially guided meditations where you can listen and a person's voice is talking you through the meditation itself. But I find that questions are often asked about sort of what is meditation? How should you do it? And this video is not a meditation itself. It's simply instructions for anyone who's interested in meditation and trying it out on a regular basis, that I hope this will, in a sense, give you some guidelines and answer some of the most common questions that come up. So one of the first questions really is, what is meditation? We all have sort of images, and often it's an image of someone sitting in a certain position, maybe their hands in a certain position, looking very serene, maybe an image of a monk. And the word meditation could be used in different ways, but I find the best way to think of it is simply as an exercise. So a formal, sort of structured exercise. And in the same way that physical exercise is helping you strengthen muscles, meditation, or at least the type of meditation I'm going to be talking about today is, in other words, mindfulness meditation, is really an exercise to help you develop better mindfulness, better ability to be mindful, better ability to live your life mindfully. So mindfulness is simply awareness, being able to observe, to notice what's happening while it's happening. It's sometimes easy to think of mindfulness by thinking of the opposite, the word mindless. When we do things mindlessly, we're not really paying attention. We're on autopilot. It's actually surprising how much we can do when we're not paying attention. You know, we can drive a car and talk to someone beside us and listen to music and not really think about, okay, now do I have to move my foot from the gas to the brake or the brake to the gas? When we're walking, we don't think, okay, I got to move my right foot now my left foot, and so on. We just do it automatically with paying very little attention. Think of the last time you walked somewhere. Were you actually aware of every step you took? Most likely not. And that's okay. We don't have to be mindful of every single thing we experience all day long. We couldn't be. But it is very helpful, of course, to have the ability to be mindful when we want to be. And meditation is best thought of as just a way to practice that for a specific period of time. And so one could look at it that there's different types of meditation, but mainly what I want to be talking about in this video is mindfulness meditation. So meditation for the purpose of developing mindfulness. There are meditations for other purposes. There's meditation, for example, some people may come across something called loving kindness meditation that's really aimed at developing more compassion. Or there's meditations that might have be part of a specific spiritual or religious practice. But in the general public these days, when people are talking about meditating, often they're talking about a type of meditation that's really just aimed at developing more mindfulness. Now, another way of classifying meditation is that you could do it with guidance or unguided meditation, which really means you're guiding yourself. So there's always an object of focus, a specific decision about something you're going to focus your attention on when you're meditating. For example, one of the more common ones would be a breath meditation, where the entire meditation you just focus on being mindful of the feeling of breathing, feeling the sensations as you breathe in and as you breathe out. This could be done with a recording or if it's a live meditation class, be a teacher guiding you, where the voice guiding you is simply reminding you, Make sure to notice your breath, notice if your mind wanders and come back, and other instructions. This is something you could do on your own. In fact, for many meditations, for example, breath meditation, once you get the basic idea of it, which doesn't take too long, you could, in theory, just do it on your own. You simply know that you're focusing on your breath, and that when your focus drifts off somewhere else, that you come back. You could set a timer for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you like, and just do it on your own. There are advantages and disadvantages of guided versus unguided meditation, but I usually recommend to people start with guided meditations. You could then continue for the rest of your life. You may only do meditation while listening to recordings that guide you. And it's really more personal choice of which you find more useful. Sometimes after you're doing it for quite a while, you don't need the guidance anymore because you know what to do. And then the voice in the recording is just a distraction from the meditation itself. So in that case, you might be better off with doing it unguided. But generally, beginners find it much more useful to have the guidance of the voice, even if it's just to have some reminders of what to do, and to have that voice in the recording bring you back, or the voice live if it's a live meditation with a teacher that you're sitting in on. Now, there's other aspects of meditation to consider. One is, what position should you be in? This is often asked about. Again, people have seen perhaps photos of people sitting cross-legged with their hands resting, maybe palms up on their knees. There's actually many positions, and there's different traditions of meditating. Generally, for the most common would be to do what sometimes called a sitting meditation. In other words, to just be sitting. And it's not that you have to. You could do it standing, lying down, whatever. But it makes sense to do it sitting because you're sort of comfortable enough to then stay in one position for a while. It's often useful for sitting meditations to take care of a few things about your position that will allow you to have a better experience of it. So one aspect that's often very helpful is to sit upright. For example, you might be able to see my chair from this position, that what you don't want to do is kind of sit back and kind of like you're about to have a nap when you're meditating, since you want to be alert and focused. If you move forward from the back of your chair and you sit upright, then you'll sort of have more of alertness. You'll be less likely to fall asleep. But really, the most important thing is to be in a position that's comfortable enough. You don't have to have 100% comfort, but comfortable enough that you won't be distracted by pain or strong discomfort. And of course, that'll be different for everyone because everyone has a different body. So even though, for example, you might read a book or hear a guided meditation that says you should sit in a certain way or that you should lie down in a certain position, really you can modify that. There's no problem doing meditations in other positions. If you, for example, wanted to, you could do an entire meditation standing, or even most sitting meditations, if you wanted to, you could do it lying down. One of the main things to consider is that if you're too comfortable, you may run into the problem of falling asleep. But beyond that, the position may not be that critical. Usually I'd recommend having your shoulders kind of relaxed and just letting your hands and arms rest wherever it's comfortable. So it might be, if you're in a chair that has arms, you might feel comfortable resting on the arms of the chair, or resting your hands on your legs or in your lap, just so you can let your arms be loose. And your legs as well should just be as loose as possible. Ideally, sitting in a chair that's the right height for you so that your knees are bent at 90 degrees and your feet are flat on the floor. And since we're talking about position, another consideration that people often ask about is, should they have their eyes closed? And again, there isn't a set rule in the sense that the important thing is to be mindful. So as long as you're being mindful of what's happening, that's really all that matters. But closing your eyes during meditation, like this has certain advantages. The main one is that with your eyes closed, there's just less visual distraction, less temptation to look around. Since often meditations require an inward focus, it's more helpful to have your eyes closed. Now, some people feel uncomfortable. They might feel vulnerable, or they might just get too sleepy. So another option that's often used is to sort of half close your eyes. If you're sitting up straight, you might kind of direct your gaze downwards so the eyes naturally will partially close, and just maybe look at a spot on the floor a few feet in front of you, but with an unfocused gaze. Again, that's not an absolute rule. You could pick some other spot in the room you're in to look at and just hold your gaze there. But it's usually best if it's something neutral so that you don't start thinking about it. So eyes closed or partly closed, different styles can both work equally well. I'd usually recommend to try the two options out and see what works best for you. And of course, another consideration is the environment you're meditating in. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and you may not be able to find a perfect environment, but ideally it would be either a chair, or if you prefer to sit on the floor, you could perhaps have a cushion and so that you can sit on cross-legged. And again, you want to have a cushion or a chair that's comfortable enough, and be in a room presumably that's quiet, or at least quiet enough where you won't be disturbed. But none of this is an absolute. People have told me that they'll ride a bus or a subway and sit there and meditate. As if you're sitting there with your eyes closed, people don't really know what you're doing, that you might be meditating, you might be just having a nap. But of course, there's a lot of distractions. So if that doesn't work well for you, then of course, find a quieter place. Some people find it helpful, if it's hard to have complete silence, is to then listen to a recording while wearing headphones. So that way the headphones block out outside noise. Another question that often comes up is how long to meditate for. And a general rule of thumb is that it's more important to meditate regularly, ideally daily, than to do longer stretches. For example, you'd be better off doing 10 minutes of meditation once a day than doing an hour meditation, but only doing it once a week. Mainly it's because the aim of it is to practice being mindful and have a daily reminder so that the rest of the day you're more likely to sort of be in sort of the frame of mind for being mindful. The other thing is that it's probably best to pick a length of meditation, and you can find recordings of every length from 1 minute to 5 to 10 minutes, even 45 minutes or an hour. But it's best to start with a length of meditation that you don't find too difficult, that you're not going to dread doing. Otherwise, you'll just end up skipping it. So if you find you've been trying to do half-hour meditations and it's just too long, it feels torturous, you keep skipping it because you don't want to do it, then try a shorter one. Try 15 minutes. If that still feels too long, try 10 minutes. Even 5 minutes a day could be useful. Because if you do it regularly, you'll probably find that over time, it gets easier to sit for longer periods. And whatever length you meditate for, if you're doing a mindfulness meditation, which might entail a breath focus or focus on some other area or just an open awareness, one of the most important things is not only to be aware of whatever your focus is. For example, with a breath meditation, it would be awareness of the feeling of breathing, the sensations. But what's really important is to have another aspect of mindfulness meditation, not only the focus itself, but one could say attitudes, the mindset that you bring to this focus. And different words are used. Often people talk about, for example, a non-judgmental awareness. I think a good way of considering the attitudes is consider words like openness, acceptance, curiosity, and also compassion and patience. So really, you're practicing not only mental focus when you do mindfulness meditation, but you're practicing all of those other qualities, sort of an openness, a sense of not judging and just allowing things to be as they are, being open to what's there. Think of it as laying out the welcome mat for what shows up each moment, because if it's showing up, it's already there. If something is showing up and we don't accept it and don't want to allow it, and we're not open to it, we have a problem because it's there anyways. And with mindfulness, we're taking an attitude that, well, if it's here and I can't get rid of it, whatever it is, it might be a sensation or a thought or a feeling or some sensory experience. The aim is to bring, again, an openness to it, and also curiosity. So having an attitude like, oh, this is interesting. Here's this thing happening. So think of how we naturally do that. For example, let's say someone gave you a food to eat, maybe with some fruit that you hadn't had before. You weren't sure about it. You're looking at it, maybe smelling it, and then you taste it because it's something you've never eaten before. You're naturally curious. You're going to be saying, oh, this is interesting. Look at the appearance. I haven't seen something that looks like this. Oh, the smell is a little bit different. And then the taste and the texture. And we tend to naturally do this for things that are very new. So really mindfulness, while we're meditating, and actually any time of the day where we want to be mindful, we're aiming to have the same open, curious attitude. In a sense, treating everything as if it's for the first time. So you could just be washing your hands in the sink using soap and water, and you could again be open to all the different sensations, different experiences, and curious about it. Kind of treating it as if, oh, this is interesting. The temperature of the water, the sensation of the soap and washing off your hands. And when you do this, you find that there's a lot going on. So that's, I think, an important thing to consider when you're meditating is the attitudes that you're bringing to it. In fact, that's often the more difficult part, because if something is sort of obvious, it's fairly easy to notice it. But noticing it while being open, curious, patient, that's often the more challenging part. Now, often when people start meditating, different sort of problems or difficulties, struggles come up with it. And I find there's certain ones that often I get asked about. So I wanted to address a few of the most common ones. Probably the most common one is what's often referred to as a wandering mind. People often say that my mind keeps wandering off. I can't focus. Sometimes people say I can't meditate. But I don't believe that there's anyone who can't meditate. Usually when people say that, it means that they were trying to focus on their breath or something like that, but they felt that they couldn't stay completely focused on it, that their mind kept going to other things and they started thinking about other things, and maybe would come back to the breath briefly before just going off again to lost in thoughts. But that itself is meditation. So the wandering mind is not a problem. In fact, the main instruction of pretty well any mindfulness meditation is a simple instruction. It's that you have an object of focus. So let's say it's your breath, or it could be your body overall. It could be sounds. It could be something else. But something that's happening in the present moment, that's your object of attention, your focus. And the instruction is simple. You just focus on that, stay focused on it, observe it, notice the details, again, with the attitudes of openness and curiosity. And also notice if your mind wanders, if your attention sort of goes somewhere else. And as soon as you notice that that's happened, just gently, patiently bring your attention back to whatever the focus was. So if it's your breath, you would just feel your breath. Okay, I feel it moving in, feel it moving out, moving in, moving out. And let's say you're doing this and suddenly you may not even realize you're doing this, but you start thinking about things you have to do later that day. suddenly your attention isn't on your breath. Your mind has drifted somewhere else. And then usually at some point, a moment will come where you realize, oh, I'm not on my breath anymore. What do? You just come back. Just bring your attention back. And then we're in your breath, and then your mind will wander somewhere else. And then you bring it back. And then it wanders again, and you bring it back. And it's best to think of that not as a bad thing if it happens, but more as the point of it all. The point of it, it's a type of exercise. So if you were lifting weights with your arms to try to strengthen your arm muscles, you would just lift the weight over and over and over. And knowing that the more times you did it, the more your muscles in your arm would get stronger. So in a way, mindfulness meditation is about strengthening mental muscles. It's about really strengthening the ability to be very focused, to hold your focus, to move your focus where you want, and to notice when your focus has gone somewhere else, when your attention has wandered, and also the ability to bring your attention back when you want to. Your mind may always wander to some degree, but you get better and better at this. This mental ability gets stronger. You're literally, and new research proves this, you're literally strengthening brain circuits. You're strengthening parts of your brain. Just like by lifting a weight over and over, you'll strengthen the muscles. By over and over bringing your mind back when it wanders, over time you build the kind of mental muscles that are needed to be more mindful. So again, mind wandering is not a problem. If your mind wanders a lot when you meditate, that's perfectly normal. Now, there's some other difficulties that sometimes come up that are worth addressing, that people often ask about and struggle with. One thing that sometimes comes up when you meditate is just physical discomfort. In fact, I'd say if you meditate for a long enough period of time, it's almost inevitable. Because if you sit, let's say, even in a fairly comfortable chair, in a completely still position for half an hour or longer, there's a good chance, at least sometimes, some unpleasant sensation will come up. Something gets a bit sore or achy or stiff, or maybe an itch appears somewhere. Some, maybe a mild discomfort, but some discomfort. And over time, there's often more and more of this, and it can be difficult to sort of sit with it. So what I would recommend is, if some discomfort shows up when you're meditating, consider one of two options that you have at that moment. So one option is just to actually treat the discomfort as another thing to be aware of mindfully. Let's say you have an itch somewhere. You notice an itch on the side of your face. Rather than just like you might do if you're on autopilot and just immediately scratching it, you could just sit for a while and notice, that's interesting. What is an itch? What is an itchy sensation? Again, that openness and curiosity. And just pay close attention to the details of it. And you might notice what exactly it feels like, where it is exactly, does it change or move around? You might also notice thoughts about it. You might notice the urge to scratch the itch, or if it's some other kind of discomfort, the urge to do something about it. So one option is just to watch all of that, observe it. Often if you do, the discomfort will just go away, or it'll kind of go in waves, and if it intensifies, it'll often just over time sort of go away or reduce in intensity. But the second option when there's discomfort when you're meditating is to actually do something about it. So I'm not advocating that you should torture yourself if you're having something that's really painful or incredibly itchy, and it's driving you nuts. It's so uncomfortable. You can't focus at all on the meditation. I'm not saying that you should just sit there and observe it and just sort of tough it out. Be compassionate with yourself. If you think it would be helpful to scratch an itch or move your body or even change what you're sitting on or change positions, that's fine. But if you do that, do it mindfully. In other words, do it with awareness. If you decide, okay, this itch is getting more intense and I can't tolerate it, I need to scratch it, then actually slow it down a little and notice. You might reach and scratch the itch and notice, how exactly does it feel when you do that? What happens to the sensations? So again, the openness and curiosity to anything that comes up. And the same actually could be applied to unpleasant emotions. So in addition to physical pain, physical discomfort, sometimes emotional discomfort may come up when you meditate. You might suddenly feel sad. You might find anxiety welling up. Sometimes it's not even clear why. Or you might feel frustration or boredom. So just like you could observe physical pain, you could observe any of those emotions and simply notice what it feels like. Does it change over time? Are there thoughts that go with it? Are there specific body sensations that go with it? So whether it's physical, sort of unpleasant sensations or unpleasant emotions, you could apply the same principles. The one other type of thing, though, that can come up when you meditate, which people often ask about and ask how to handle, is basically sleepiness. I sometimes think of sleepiness as the occupational hazard of meditating. After all, you're trying to be in a relatively comfortable position. You let your body relax, you close your eyes. So your mind may decide, oh, nap time. And it's not the end of the world if that happens. It doesn't mean you're failing at it. But you're not really meditating when you're asleep. So ideally, we want to try to stay awake during meditation, or at least through most of it. So you'll probably find that over time, sleepiness becomes less of a problem. When you think about it, if your mind is really focused on something, you're really engrossed in something interesting, you're probably not going to fall asleep. If you're watching a movie and you're just gripped by this movie, it's so interesting and so exciting, that's not when you're going to fall asleep. So if you're focusing on your breath, but it doesn't seem very interesting, yeah, you might get sleepy. But if you really start noticing details of breathing, you'll notice a lot of interesting aspects of it. And then the more you notice that, the more that will sort of wake you up. But often for beginners, that's difficult. And if sleepiness keeps becoming a problem when you're new to meditation, often what works best is just to change something externally or about your position to help you stay awake. So again, I was mentioning before, but moving forward in the chair, imagine if you move right to the front of your chair and sit upright, you're still relatively comfortable, but you're not as likely to fall asleep because you'll start feeling it. That's one of the reasons why sitting on a cushion on the floor can be useful, because you have to support your own back. And again, you're less likely to fall asleep. Another option, if you just find you get really sleepy when you meditate, is just have your eyes open. Just pick a neutral spot to look at and keep your eyes open. If you're really stuck and even that isn't working, you could try standing. And hopefully you won't fall asleep standing. If you do fall asleep standing, I would recommend talking to a doctor about that, but because that shouldn't happen. But if you're that sleepy, you could actually do the same meditation you were doing, just do it from a standing position. The other option is, if you're really, really tired and sleepy, maybe don't do a sitting meditation or one lying down, but you could do another category of meditation. I suppose you could call moving meditation where you're actually moving. So for example, if you do yoga, you could just do a series of yoga poses and hold each pose, being really mindful of your body as you do it. Or a common practice for meditators is sometimes called walking meditation, where you simply walk very slowly, mindfully, and really pay close attention to each step. Maybe feel your feet as they move forward, feel all the little details. Again, something that if your energy is low, maybe you're sleep deprived and you're just going to get too sleepy when you meditate, that may be a good alternative. So bottom line, I think the important thing is to just stick with it. Do a little bit every day. Maybe over time you'll increase the amount of time you do it. And consider all the tips that I've mentioned in the video. And basically, the aim is to make it a habit. So if you do anything daily, after a while, it becomes sort of automatic. And even more so if you can pick the same time and the same place each day to do it, because then it'll sort of automatically be in your mind and you won't have to kind of remind yourself or force yourself to do it. Keep in mind as well that if you are new to meditation and you're starting to do it daily or most days, don't get too caught up in expecting immediate results. Sometimes people meditate once or twice and then say, well, I didn't feel any better or I felt worse, and they want to quit. If you meditate daily, usually after several weeks, you'll start noticing some differences. And, after a month or two, even more so. But it may take a while. So don't expect that just a few days of it is going to make a huge difference. So hopefully all these different tips were helpful to you. And the more important thing is just try it out. There's so many different apps now, so many websites. If you just search on the internet for meditation recordings or search on YouTube, you'll find a lot of different ones, including some that I've uploaded to my YouTube channel. So I wish you good luck with your meditation and see how it goes.